How's it going, guys? It's Ryan here, and welcome to testing out Decimation. Before we start crunching numbers, I thought we'd take a really quick look at this bow from an aesthetic perspective only. And as you can see, it's a pretty well-designed weapon. It looks really cool, and you'll see a lot of really rich higher level players who have this weapon as an override for purely cosmetic purposes. Now, because most of us aren't super rich and we don't really have the option to pay 57 mil for a bow just to use as an override, we should probably start looking at some numbers. So, without further ado, some numbers. For starters, Decimation is a tier 87 two-handed bow and it costs 4.5 million GP to repair. Now, it's always worth noting that the repair cost is less at a player on house armor stand depending on your smithing level, and at level 99 smithing, it's going to be about half the cost is going to bob and lumberage. So if you're planning on getting this bow and you're not planning on augmenting it, it's definitely worth getting your house set up. Okay, now for the important stuff. Here is a comparison between the tier 85 Wyvern crossbow, the tier 87 Decimation, the tier 90 Noxious longbow, and the tier 92 Saren godbow. It includes the prices, accuracies, and damages of all four of these weapons, and it's really important to note that these prices are based on the 3rd of March. They will not update, so before you make a decision, you definitely want to recheck your prices, especially if you're watching this video 3 or 4 or 5 months after the date posted. When you look at the damage rating on the Decimation bow, you are going to notice there's an asterisk there, and the reason there's an asterisk there is because the actual weapon damage on the bow is 1598. Now you might be wondering how I got that 1944 number and why I'm not displaying 1598. Well, it's because all of these weapons have the same attack speed except for the Decimation. The damage listed at 1598 is the auto attack damage and not the ability damage. Because the attack speed on every weapon when using abilities is the same, a weapon with 1598 damage and the attack speed of Decimation actually converts to exactly 1944 damage, and the reason I've done that is just so that all of the weapons are displayed on an even playing field. If I displayed the Decimation damage as 1598, you'd think that it'd be significantly less damaging than the Wyvern crossbow, but that's not the case because it actually scales when you're firing off abilities. Now, if that explanation didn't make sense, don't worry about it too much, it's fine. The damage I've listed is the ability damage you're going to get with the weapon. The explanation was more for those who would purchase the bow or look at the wiki and see a different damage rating than the one I've listed. This is one of those weapons that was a ton of fun to test, and I actually enjoyed it so much I've had this weapon on my account for the better part of 2 months. Usually when I make one of these testing videos, I'll buy the weapon, I'll use it for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll sell it off before I make the video, but this weapon has a really fun special attack, which we should probably talk about right now. Decimation has a special attack called Locate, which uses 50% of your adrenaline. For 10 seconds, any ability you use, with a couple exceptions, will work as a multi-target ability in a 3x3 square. What exactly does this mean? Well, it means that if you have a bunch of enemies really close in tight around you and you fire off this special attack, you can kill them all at the exact same time. You can do something like a snapshot or a rapid fire or a shadow tendrils, and instead of just hitting one target, it will hit all of them. Okay, so you might be thinking, that sounds absolutely overpowered, and you're not wrong, but the usefulness of the special attack is actually quite limited. There are some places where the special attack is absolutely incredible, and Chargers at Beastmaster, that's just one of those locations where it's absolutely amazing, it's so much fun. But there are also a ton of different places and bosses and scenarios where the special attack can be good, and in other cases it can be absolutely terrible. So I'm gonna do you guys a favor. Instead of making you spend 57 mil on a bow to see if it's actually good at these places, I'm gonna go through a bunch of these different locations and I'm gonna let you know right now if the special attack is worth using. Okay, so the first place we're gonna go is Araxor, and believe it or not, I actually bought the bow because I thought it might be incredible to take care of the minions really quickly. Unfortunately, I was wrong. The problem with the spiders is they take up more than one square, so in most scenarios the spiders aren't going to all be stacked up on top of each other. The other thing is they only have 3,000 life points, so it really isn't worth it to lose 50% of your adrenaline to take care of them really quickly when a bombardment ability will usually hit around 3,000 anyway. You just don't need the special attack, and unfortunately, that's a no for me. Do not buy the bow, just use the special attack at Araxor. Next up, Slayer. It can be extremely hit or miss, and it really depends on what task you have. I did a little slay day with the bow, and I found most of the tasks I got, the special attack was not worth using at all. I hear it can be extremely good at enemies, and most other tasks, it's not going to be great. It really depends on how many enemies are piling you and how many people are surrounding you at the exact same moment. One of the few places the special attack was really cool was Abyssal Demons, and I actually figured out a different way to do them where you're basically spamming the special attack the entire time. But I'll get into that a little bit later when we're talking about using the bow as a primary weapon. As you can imagine, any task with larger monsters was absolutely terrible. That includes things like dark beasts and dragons, absolutely not worth using the special attack. That being said, it was a lot of fun to have the special attack handy so that whenever a bunch of monsters did stack up, I could use it and it wasn't entirely inefficient. Overall, the combination of larger Slayer creatures and them being extremely spread out led to the special attack being not extremely efficient in most scenarios. Okay, next up we're going to Rise of the Six. There's that famous 6-second Rise of the Six kill where everyone on the team just used a Decimation and they one-hit all the brothers, and it was really cool, but actually bringing the bow to Rise of the Six, it wasn't that good. The problem is, for most people who are killing rots, you're not going to be adren stalling between kills. If you're starting a kill with no adren, by the time you've built up to full adren, one of the brothers is already going to be dead, and then the usefulness of the special attack is just instantly 0 already. That being said, if you want to do a kill and you want to start with full adren, it could definitely be a lot of fun. You can attack 2 or sometimes even 3 brothers at the exact same time, and you know, that is pretty cool, but for the majority of people, it's not particularly useful at rots. Okay, next up I went to Telos. Just don't range it, Telos. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You're gonna die, and no, just don't. Okay, the next place we're gonna talk about is Nex, Angel of Death. At Angel of Death, the special attack is actually quite useful. When you've got all the minions stacked up, whether that's in a corner or on top of Nex, the special attack can be extremely effective in bringing down the minions really quickly. It's definitely comparable to Mechanized Chinchompas, as instead of being tier 75, you're going all the way up to tier 87. You can augment it, you can put perks on it, and that can allow you to do a ton of damage in a really short amount of time. So Angel of Death is one of those places when it was definitely worth having the bow, especially since the bow has a static price. It's worth 57 mil, you buy it for 57 mil, if you use it for a little bit, you pay a little bit to repair it, but you can probably sell it back for a similar price, whereas Mechanized Chinchompas are somewhat expensive. You're actually using them, and when you use them, you don't get them back. So in that sense, I think the bow was definitely cool to have at Angel of Death, and I really did enjoy those range kills. Okay, we've talked briefly about where the special attack is useful, but we haven't really talked about what to do when you're using the special attack and how to take advantage of it. So I'm going to take the next 30 seconds here and quickly go over a couple really good abilities to use. Shadow Tendrils is that ability that deals you damage, but then deals the person you're attacking even more damage. The reason it's really overpowered with the bow is because it will only damage you for the one primary target you're attacking, but it will apply all of the damage to all of the targets around that main target. What that means is that you can hit 10,000 plus damage on every target around you without one hitting yourself. Now, the one other ability that doesn't quite work how you'd expect it to is the ultimate ability, Incendiary Shot. Incendiary Shot in itself is an area of effect ability where the explosion will hit all targets adjacent to the target you're fighting, but it's even more overpowered with the bow special attack because instead of just exploding once, it will actually explode once for every target in the vicinity. What this means is you can do 4 or 5 extremely high damaging hits to each target each time you use this ability. Okay, so we've talked about this bow as a special attack weapon, but let's talk about it as a primary. The first place we're gonna go is Araxor. Okay, I'm gonna start off by just straight up saying this bow is really good at Araxor. I noticed almost no difference between this and a Noxious Longbow, and that might sound like a fairly weird thing to say, but I really noticed almost no difference. At a lot of the bosses I visited after Araxor, you could tell a significant difference where you'd have trouble hitting or you wouldn't be doing that much damage, but at Araxor, it was almost identical. I was still hitting 12Ks with my tendrils, I was still getting kills at a very similar speed to when I was getting kills with a Noxious Longbow, and on top of that, this is Decimation without any perks on it as well. So on the whole, if you want a really solid weapon at Araxor, you don't have that 150 mil for a Noxious Longbow, I would strongly recommend this thing. It was really good at Araxor. I did like 12 or 13 kills. I just ended up doing my daily racks with it because it was that similar to the bow I was going to be using anyway. And this is one of the places where I would 100% recommend it to anyone. If you're going to racks right now with like a tier 80, just because you don't have enough money for that Noxious Longbow, definitely try out this thing. It will make a massive difference. It's just a really good bow to have. Also, because it's the first boss we're going over, I should mention this bow does not use any ammunition, so you don't even need to worry about that. I have a quiver equipped just for the prayer bonus, but it does take no ammunition at all, so that's another cost you don't need to worry about. If I was going to be nitpicky about this bow, there was one place where I did actually notice a bit of a difference between it and the Noxious Longbow, and that would actually be onslaughting at the end of my Araxes. Obviously, you don't have to onslaught, but I choose to a lot of the time. I find it a really fun way to get it done, and I did notice that it took a tiny bit longer to get Araxe down, so I did have to time my onslaught pretty well perfectly to get it done in time. So that was one little spot where I did notice a bit of a difference, where the onslaught was never getting into that like 7 and 8k range, and it was capping off around 5 or 6k more frequently, but other than that, that, it was really smooth sailing. Now, because I know a lot of you guys don't have Onslaught, I thought I'd go into the Acid Wave and just drop it with Thresholds, give you guys an example of what that looks like. So yeah, that's what you're looking at right now. As you can see, the damage is pretty good, it's pretty consistent, and the Acid Wave only landed on me very, very briefly right at the end for 1 tick, and then Araxi was down. So overall, at Araxor, I would strongly recommend this weapon. The next place I brought this bow was the Queen Black Dragon, and at QBD, the bow was extremely good. You just do a ton of damage, it's accurate, it's consistent, it was really, really smooth sailing at QBD, and if you're planning on doing QBD, this is definitely a good weapon to invest in. You'll make your money back pretty quickly. My average kill speed was around 1 minute and 32 seconds, and remember, that's also without any perks on the bow itself, and that's also without a damaging familiar, as I brought a Yak. On the whole, I would definitely recommend this weapon at the Queen Black Dragon. It's just really, really quick and really consistent as well. Now, despite Decimation being really good at QBD, there is one little downside. Because Decimation has its own ammunition that it fires automatically, you actually can't couple it with Dragonbane ammunition. Dragonbane ammunition isn't actually as damaging as the Decimation itself, but it provides an incredible accuracy bonus that can be extremely beneficial, especially for those lower level players who don't have curses or overloads, and for those players, you'd definitely be better off taking a slightly lower tier weapon with Dragonbane ammunition. Overall, this weapon is kind of exactly what I was expecting it to be at Queen Black Dragon. It was pretty accurate, it was pretty damaging, and overall, it was pretty good. Next up, we're going to talk about Angel of Death. Angel of Death's a really interesting boss because you actually get drops based on how much damage per second you do. You need to be top 5 on your team for DPS to get a DPS drop, and then the 2 people who tank the most damage also get drops. This means that if you're in a 7-man, everyone on the team will get a drop, but if you're in a larger team than 7, not everyone on the team will necessarily get a nice drop. For this reason, bringing Decimation as a primary weapon can end a little bit poorly for you if you're on a team that's larger than 7 people. The reason for this is it's going to be a little bit difficult to compete in terms of damage per second with everyone else if everyone else on the team has a higher tier weapon than you. Now, that being said, if you're on an entire team and people have a mix of tier 85s and tier 87s and tier 90s, this bow will definitely do the trick. It's accurate, it's fine, it's just not going to be as good as that Noxious Longbow or that Noxious Staff. Overall, I wouldn't buy this bow if you have plans to do small team Angel of Death with it. You're just not going to get too many DPS drops, and it's not going to be a particularly enjoyable time. That being said, if your plan for Angel of Death is to go in like a big 15-20 man mass and just try your luck on a wand or codex split, this thing will definitely do the trick and you'll have no problem at all. Now we're going to take things to Rots. The thing about Rise of the Six is accuracy is extremely important, and accuracy is a little harder to come by than some of the other bosses we've talked about in this video. Despite me using both a Nihil and an accuracy aura, it was really hard to hit the brothers at certain points. And there were some moments in there when I'd miss 5 or 6 or 7 attacks in a row and it got extremely frustrating. On the flip side of that, there were some moments when I'd hit every single attack and I was able to do a ton of good damage in a really short period of time, but overall, I missed too many attacks for it to be consistently good. Okay, now we're going to talk about Decimation as a Slayer weapon at a variety of popular Slayer tasks. First off, we're at Dark Beasts, and even though the special attack is completely useless here, you'll see that I was averaging in the top right corner of the screen approximately 1 million experience per hour at the Dark Beasts. Just with the Decimation, I'm not even using a cannon or anything, and this task absolutely flew by. The experience breakdown was around 230k Slayer experience per hour and around 770k experience per hour in combat. That's just to say, even if you're not taking advantage of the special attack, it's still a tier 87 ranged weapon, and you can still do a whole lot of damage with that. Next up, we're going to take things to Abbey Demons, and I did things a little bit differently here. At Abbey Demons, I tried to take advantage of the special attack as often as I possibly could, and I found it to be quite a bit better than going with a Noxious Longbow. As you can see in the top right, I'm getting about 920,000 experience per hour, and that's not on a Slayer task, so I don't have a Slayer Helm bonus, and that's 920,000 experience just in combat. That's extremely high, and I'd say on average it was probably closer to 880k experience per hour, but still, that's an absolute ton of experience considering I'm using only ranged weapons at Abbey Demons, which is something that not too many people do. I was getting these experience rates by building up to 100% adrenaline, using the special attack, and then using either Tendrils or Piercing Shot. I basically just did that over and over again the entire time. The last monster I checked out with this bow were Eruts, and they were pretty terrible. I've gotta say, ranging Eruts is just not a thing you want to do. The hit chance is terrible even when you're maxing out your accuracy bonus, and on top of that, they hit extremely hard because of the combat triangle. In the end, I was just getting absolutely destroyed, and the kill speed was definitely slower than you'd be getting with a scythe. There were a couple moments when I'd start doing a ton of damage in a really short period of time, and I'd start to think, oh, maybe this is working, maybe I've finally gotten to the swing of it, and then 8 seconds later, I'd get smacked a bunch of 3Ks in a row, I'd come close to being dead, and then I'd have to eat a bunch of food. At a certain point, I even came back in full tank gear to see if that would help, and it just slowed down the kills even more. Okay, so we've tested out this bow in some PvM scenarios, but what about player versus player? I'm literally only gonna do one fight. I haven't PvP'd in an age and a half, and there are only 24 people on the PvP world, so yeah, not gonna be doing too many fights. Okay, I'm jumping into a target fight with this guy, and I know I'm 100% gonna die. He's got the necklace that makes him hit like 900s, and yeah, this isn't gonna go too well for me. Oh, unless I kill him right here. Oh, please, I don't even have spec. Oh, this is not good. Special attack! Really? It actually zeroed. And I didn't bring in a Dren pot, so this might not be the best thing. Yeah, it's gonna be really hard to kill this guy, just because I know he can hit like straight up 800s. Like, no problem. From that life point, he can hit 800s because the amulet, it's really, really overpowered, and it's still kind of broken. Look at this, he's hitting, yeah. Figured that was gonna happen. Turns out the Decimation is not the greatest weapon in PvP history. It's kind of like a Zarya bow, but it hits a little bit harder, but you can't actually get any KOs with it. I talked about it at the very start of the video, but basically its attack speed is kind of fast, and what that means is the max hit that I can actually get with one of these bow hits is kind of low, which means the KO potential is not quite there. It means quicker debo switching, but still, it's not a great PvP weapon. That's gonna just about do it for this video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Overall, I would say the bow was better than I expected it to be. I'm a max player, I've got a lot of money, I've got a Noxious longbow, and even better gear than that, and yet this bow was still useful to me in some niche scenarios. So anyway guys, let me know what you think, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Have a great one, and peace out. We'll see you again next week for the finale of the Road to Max Cash Drop Tab.